Imagine the look on your neighbor's face, the one who's been polishing different generations of Passats in front of his house for the past 10 years. You arrive at your house in an SUV without a Volkswagen logo, making it unrecognizable. All that's obvious is it looks pricier than it is. It has 197 horsepower and it costs as much as a basic compact car from Europe. Here's the Jetour dashing 1.6 turbo. Let's begin with an interesting behind-the-scenes fact. Jetour is part of the Chery Group. The Chery Group is very well known in Poland because there are already plenty of JQ Moda, Xlantics recently, and also Tiggo cars driving on Polish roads. After all of these belong to the Chery Group. And yet the Jetour brand was brought and imported to Poland by a completely different company than the one that deals with those other mentioned brands. I don't know why the Chinese decided to split the brands from their portfolio between two completely separate companies. It's like if in Poland Volkswagen was sold by one company and Audi by a completely different one that has nothing to do with Volkswagen. That's what it comes down to after all. This car has the same technology, the same engines, just look at the front. These narrow LEDs and the big grille made it so that in most articles and videos about this model, people either call it the Chinese Urus or a Lambo knockoff. I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, but I do know that it's hard to walk past this car without noticing it, especially when you consider that its prices start at 113,000 zlotys. But I'll get back to the prices later. First, let's talk about the engine. Under the hood, there are no hybrid tricks, just a classic 1.6 turbo with direct injection. It has 197 horsepower, 290 Nm of torque, and with the 7-speed dual-clutch transmission automatic, it accelerates to 100 km/h in 8 seconds. Declared, of course. I'll check that in practice in a moment. The top speed is 210 km/h. I won't be testing that, although I'm curious how it behaves at that speed. However, I will check the fuel consumption because the importer claims an optimistic 7 liters per 100 kilometers. I'll just add that liquefied petroleum gas is available here, but at the moment it's not. It's a kind of promotion for 1 zloty and at the price of 6,500. And the fact that this is direct injection and gasoline is also used means that this investment will take a while to pay off. Of course, it depends on how much you drive per year. And here are the measurement results. On liquefied petroleum gas, it was possible to achieve a result of around 10 seconds, while after switching to gasoline, it was 9.2. However, it's still a slightly worse result than the one declared by the manufacturer, but that's probably because the test car had liquefied petroleum gas installed, which made the car heavier, and the driver wasn't exactly light either. As for fuel consumption, at around 90 km/h, it was about 8.5 liters, while at 120 km/h, I got around 11 liters. Some interesting facts about fuel consumption. Why do I say interesting facts? Because we have trip 1 and trip 2 here, and only the second one can be reset. The first one resets automatically when you turn the engine on or off, but only for distance and average speed because, for example, it's not clear at all when the average fuel consumption resets. Here, the reset button for the second trip looks promising, although it doesn't quite work the way we'd like because, in fact, it only resets the distance. Well, now it won't reset because it's already reset, but the average speed only resets when you turn off the engine and nothing at all resets this one. These values can become unsynchronized while driving since they change. I completely don't understand this logic, so all the average consumption values given here are just an approximation, which, as I showed, since there's gas here, are always just some kind of estimate anyway. In the press, they sometimes show the partition map during elections. Look how Poland is divided. Here they chose one, there another. Well, let me show you something more interesting. A map of imported cars. The Eastern Wall, Audi A4 Prestige. The Western Wall, Volkswagen Golf, Practicality. The center of Poland, Opel Astra, Modesty. Interesting, isn't it? A very clear division. This isn't a theory. These are statistics from the Autodina report summarizing the year 2025 in the used car market. You'll also find gems like the most frequently damaged cars. Do you know how many BMW 5 Series in the Autodina database have a recorded damage? Every third one? Every second one? Over 3/4. The link to Autodina is in the description. It's worth checking it out, not just for interesting facts, but mainly for vehicle identification number reports, which you should take a look at before buying a car to avoid getting one that's been in an accident or has a rolled back odometer. The link is in the description. You're welcome. You can feel some inspiration from Tesla in the interior. Look at this huge 15-inch screen, which has taken over most of the car's functions. There aren't too many physical buttons here, only these ones on the doors have remained. Besides that, here we still have controls for at least the hazard lights, start, stop, and at least the gear shift lever. All the air conditioning controls are on the screen. Everything you see here is on the screen. Window controls, tailgate controls, seat controls, which of course we can also adjust, fortunately with buttons on the seats, but for example the external mirror controls. Now it's only with those distinctive knobs, which I think also come from the same factory as in Tesla, because these are very characteristic button knobs. But of course it's not a complete copy, because in Tesla you don't have this screen in front of the driver, it's under the steering wheel, and here it is in front of the driver. Okay, it's definitely not a complete copy, but for example look at these spots for phones. They're set up very vertically, I would say. These aren't chargers at all, it's just a place for your phone, like this. Here we have a passage, you see, possibly for cables. And here we also have, USB outputs in two formats, some kind of tray. This is a charger. And here indeed it has cooling, as you can see, and it really works. And what's important, it works really fast, because here we have 50W2 cup holders, one deeper, one shallower. Quite a large storage compartment under the armrest. There's also an extra tray. And to finish the topic of storage, we have a large compartment in the door, as well as a tray under the handle. Look, here we also have something you can use. Well, which is also indicated by this strap here, which is probably meant to keep this thing from falling out. Interestingly, on the back we also have an identical notch here for a magnet. But there was no budget left for that strap and that magnet in the back. Since I've already started talking about compartments, let me show them to you. There's also a compartment in front of the passenger. It's plastic inside, but at least it opens slowly. And on top, yes, that's what's good about Chinese cars, we have a compartment for sunglasses. When it comes to materials, the entire dashboard is made of plastic that flexes nicely under your finger. Here we have a kind of windowsill with a texture that's, let's say, not boring, but it's also not particularly expensive to the touch. Down here, on the other hand, we have quite a lot of foam underneath. It actually looks surprisingly soft and pleasant. And again, even lower, we're already entering the area of hard plastics. Here we have a piano black finish without any unnecessary or essential decorations. The armrest on the right bends only symbolically, barely, really. On the left it's the same. And finally, let's tug on the handles and plastics. Let's try to pull off this screen. It didn't work. It doesn't creak at all. Here, this protruding element is hanging perfectly in the air. Grab it and listen. Even these plastics at this level make a slight sound. But this element itself is assembled very solidly. Let's press here somewhere. Let's press here somewhere. What else can we break off here? Let's yank the door. Quiet and solid. And it's definitely better than you might imagine what it could be like in a car for, well, just a little over 110,000 zlotys. The liquefied petroleum gas controls are placed in the usual spot. However, the location chosen for the vehicle identification number is not very typical. It's right in front of the driver. I don't know why I have to look at it constantly. And I haven't even mentioned the most important gadget yet, which ended up here in a completely unexpected way. And it's actually well hidden, because when you look at this door, what do you see? Well, a door, right? At most, we could say, you haven't mentioned yet whether it's soft here. Well, let me tell you now, it's soft here. Here it's hard. And here it's a bit more flexible under your finger. There's also a nice stitching. Generally nothing unusual, until we do a close-up. Here. What do we have here? We have 11 degrees outside. And the particulate matter 2.5 dust content is 5. Really? In this place, like this? Generally, it's a cool gadget. Why not? However, I have two questions. Why is it almost invisible?
And the second question, since we already have a hectare of screen here, what was stopping you from putting this particular information somewhere here, here, or here? There's no shortage of space, or here.
I appreciate that someone seeks what the competition lacks. Who else offers this? I don't know, I saw something like that in the back of a BMW 7 Series. I mean, not exactly like this, but screens on the back. I remember seeing it once in the C4 Picasso. There were screens in those weird places. I don't remember if they were yellowish, monochrome, or color, but there was something like that. Well, you don't see screens on the doors very often. And finally, I'll say that wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay work. Now, these 2-meter guys, and I'll say right away, it's a pass. Yes, I have enough headroom here. Here we have, oh, I'll show you the sunroof, the panorama. I have enough knee room. I also have the proper position in relation to the steering wheel. However, I'm sitting a bit too high in relation to the steering wheel. It seems to me that the steering wheel starts a bit too low in relation to the seat. Or the seat could go a little lower. Of course, we adjust the steering wheel in 2 planes. It's not a huge task. We have a range of adjustment, but let's say it's sufficient. We also have electric seat adjustment. We can also adjust it from the screen here. We don't have adjustable headrests. We also don't have lumbar support, the lumbar section. However, the height adjustment is done by raising not the whole seat. It's a gentle cradle that moves more or less in this plane. It doesn't matter to me since I always sit in the lowest position anyway. From the back, I can also say right away, yes, that's checked. However, I'm really squeezed in here. My knees are right up against the seat. I can't say that I'm uncomfortable with it. I also don't have to slouch my head. I'm not touching the headliner, but it's right above my head. So there's no extra space, but everything is checked. However, there's actually an excess of space. Remember, I complained that the driver's seat was set too high. I have plenty of room for my shoes. I could literally dance here. There's so much space left behind the driver's seat. We have a flat floor here. We have 2 air vents in the center here. We have 1 USB outlet. We have pockets behind the seats. We have pretty big pockets in the doors and a rather clever little compartment. Maybe I wouldn't call it that, but there's also a tray under the handle. We also have a soft, comfortable armrest with 2 cup holders. We have quite a large range of headrest adjustment, I have to admit. The difference in height is noticeable. And we have a 2-step adjustment for the backrest angle. Look, this is for sitting, and this is for lying down. Maybe it's not a big angle, but it's there. However, the bench itself is fixed in place. And of course, we have a sense of space, which comes from the fact that we have panoramic windows here, so we simply see more of the world. Let's take a look at the trunk now. As you can see, we have an electric tailgate here, which is in no hurry to open. And after lifting the tailgate, we have quite a large trunk. Listen, 485 liters in this class, in this size of cars. That's probably quite a good result. It's measured according to the European Verbände Automobile Industry standard, by the way. We also have quite a luxurious feature here in the form of 2 lights, 1 on each side. Also, at this price, especially at this price, there's just 1 light. However, we don't have any clear hooks here. We have a sunshade here, which you attach in an old-fashioned way, so to speak. And under the trunk floor, we have a tank, which, as you can see, changes the layout a bit here, because you can see that theoretically you could have the floor 1 level lower as well. But at this height, when you fold the backrest like this, getting 974 liters of capacity in the process, you get an almost perfectly flat floor, because the backrests fold down almost completely horizontally. The loading threshold, as you know, is not the lowest, but that's often the case with SUVs. An interesting feature are these small pockets on both sides. In theory, you could put some small items in them, but it's better not to, because look, they're open to the inside. So if you put some small items into these little pockets, you can be sure that those small items will soon end up somewhere here in the depths of this gas cylinder, and it will be hard to get them out. Tested, tested, tested. As proof that something can actually fall in here, I found a pair of glasses under the floor. One of the testers lost them, so if anyone is missing a pair, they're Bridgestones. Just report it to the main office. And now it's time for the driving impressions, and I'll tell you, when you get into a car that looks like this, of course you expect something to happen. Especially since the specs aren't bad either, because we're dealing with a car that has almost 200 horsepower and a declared 0 to 100 acceleration. That's pretty good. As you've already seen from my measurements, in reality it's a bit more, and on gas it's even a bit more than that. But either way, this isn't a slow car, so when we're driving and want to accelerate, it's no problem at all. It picks up speed, you can feel it, it pushes you into the seat. You can't say this car doesn't go, but what happens in the cabin then? As you heard, just like during normal driving, you hear, you don't hear. Exactly, this engine really isn't present here, acoustically. So during hard acceleration, now I have 4,000 revolutions per minute, 4,500, 5,000. Well, now it's not really a sound anymore, we're more into decibels now. And since I'm already talking about this fast, dynamic driving, I have to say a few words about sport mode. Because everything I've been showing and presenting to you here was in normal mode. We also have eco mode, which changes the characteristics. Here you have to press harder to see the difference. Whatever happened, it's okay, it can be useful sometimes. However, the sport mode lights up, and there's actually a sport sign on the display here in front of me, which I guess means sport. And it actually makes reaching those 5,000 RPMs seem much quicker. However, the problem with sport mode is that it works well when you really want to drive in a sporty way. But if you stay in sport mode and just want to maintain your speed, it's like trying to balance a ball on top of a hill. No matter how you try to set it, the ball will always roll off one way or the other. So in sport mode, if you want to drive at, say, 60, it really takes a lot of precision to keep the gas pedal in just the right spot so you can maintain a constant speed. That was pretty interesting. Actually, I didn't even notice it at first, but when we were filming two cars driving together, I just couldn't sync up with the other car in sport mode because I was either speeding up or slowing down all the time. What's going on? Then I realized that luckily, after switching to normal mode, the car starts driving normally. And continuing on the topic of sporty driving, the Moose test. Generally, this car has a pretty sporty suspension, again, sporty. So driving over small bumps like these various spots here where the overpass connects with the road. I'm not even talking about manholes or tram tracks, you can really feel it very clearly. It really lets us know that it's no longer driving on a smooth road, and we can feel it, there's no doubt about it. So the stiffness, the suspension at those low-level vibrations is the opposite. At the same time, if we started rocking this car, it would be very willing to sway. And interestingly, this softness during gentle rocking doesn't translate at all into any problems with the Moose test, because a very sharp jerk. Besides, the steering system really wants to. It obediently turns, does what it can, and doesn't resist. The car obediently dives in the right direction without any understeer. And basically, even without a squeal from the tires, it changes direction one way or the other and returns to its place even with quite significant deviations. However, it does its job in such a way that not even a single warning light comes on here, and the electronic stability program doesn't have to step in to save the car from rolling over. Everything happens completely calmly. Considering how much it leans from the vertical, it's a surprisingly stable maneuver. To sum up, if someone asked me whether this car's sporty, aggressive look is matched by sporty, aggressive behavior, I'd say, oh, we've just entered a tunnel, but I think you can still see me. I'd say absolutely yes. And even the not-so-stiff suspension, which allows it to sway a bit in sharper turns, doesn't really change that. The impression is that in sport mode, it really encourages you to have fun. So in my opinion, it's a very consistently tuned car. It was designed in a bold, sporty way, and it can drive like that too. And the best proof of that is the sport mode, which is really tuned for the track. Either you're going full throttle or braking hard. There's nothing in between. However, on public roads, that's obviously not the case. Therefore, for public roads, I recommend either the normal mode, which is more than enough for me here, or possibly the eco mode, which, let's say, in my experience, slightly slows down the gearbox. Which is not super fast anyway, but it's still a 7-speed gearbox because in the 1.5 turbo version it's a 6-speed. So we always have a wider range of gear ratios to choose from. But you can't say that this gearbox is extremely sporty and fast when it comes to decision making. So if I had to point out the least sporty element of this car, which doesn't mean it's bad, just the least sporty, it would be this gearbox. To sum up the driving impression, it's definitely a car with character, and there's definitely something to talk about here. Because it's not standard, average, or boring. And in my opinion, its uniqueness fits very well with what its appearance actually promised. And here, for example, we have this kind of logic. Here we control the music, and here we control. Or here is a shortcut, you can assign it to whatever you want. Or we can turn on the cameras, here you can choose several different options. Or we can also use this here, depending on the driving mode. You could say, so now, as we're standing, look, here we have the air vents. Of course, all the climate control is operated on the screen, but besides what we see here, there are plenty of buttons. Of course, it's a dual zone climate control. But the driver doesn't have to use the screen for that, because there's a knob here. And when you turn it like this, then wait, I'll turn it off. Actually, I'm in a trap here, which I'll talk about in a moment. So I just started the car and look what happens. I have 23, I'll turn it down here, and now I have 20 right. So the temperature control is here, and the airflow strength is left and right, and that changes nicely too, unless, and here's the catch, unless we decide to switch to cruise control while driving, and then the cruise control updates and activates here. Now with this, we can set the distance to the car in front of us, or also change the set speed. From that moment until it's turned off, in my experience, until the engine is turned off, the climate control is managed on the screen. Now, a few words about visibility. The exterior mirrors are very large. The one on the left is not attached to the A-pillar. The A-pillar itself is quite wide, but it's far from the driver's eyes, so let's say it doesn't get in the way that much. I've already complained that I'm sitting too high, so it wouldn't take much for me to miss this modest, not too big interior mirror. But I don't miss it, so it does cut my visibility a little here. On the right side, the A-pillar is basically merged with the mirror. Moving on, the B-pillar isn't too wide, but at the level of the C and D pillars, well, there's a small window there, which honestly doesn't change much. The D-pillar is really very massive. The rear window isn't very big either, it's quite slanted, so I think it's not a disaster, but those cameras on board will probably come in handy. And here we have either 2D, or we can zoom in like this, or like that, or switch to 3D, rotate the car around. We can look only forward or only backward. There's something here like a 4x4 drive, probably a transparent chassis, but I don't really know how to make it so that this function can be demonstrated. Anyway, generally there's no big problem with visibility, especially since we're assisted by this set of cameras. I'll add one more thing. Maybe not exactly about visibility, but about accessibility. Here, the button for releasing the handbrake ended up in a rather strange place. Usually it's somewhere here within easy reach. When we need to reach for it quickly, it turns out that we actually have to do it not with the right hand, but with the left, and really look over there, because it's not easy to hit it intuitively. Now, the lighting at night. Let's start with the steering wheel. Everything under the steering wheel is illuminated. Here too, the few buttons as well as the gas pedal. We also have illuminated buttons on the doors. We finally have a visible window with indicators, as you can see, particulate matter 2.5, or the outside temperature. We don't have illuminated door handles, we don't have illuminated compartments, we don't have illuminated footwells, but we do have, for example, these strips here in the middle or by the cup holders. These lines run illuminated on the right side and in the back, you could say, in full length. Interestingly, above the screen, we also have this extra element here by the speaker, which is active. So here, you see, when we use the turn signal to the right, it flashes to the right, and to the left, it flashes to the left. Well, something is happening. Of course, we can set the colors to be more or less intense, and it will be intense if that's what we want. Unfortunately, the glove compartment in front of the passenger is not illuminated, the armrest is not illuminated, and the space underneath isn't either, but for example, the USB ports are. On the headliner, the most important buttons are, as you can see, illuminated. And here's an interesting thing. I don't really know what it's about. Maybe you can tell me. This is the lighting in the mirrors. What is this supposed to signal or symbolize? Mountains? Clouds? I don't know. I mentioned that prices start at 113,000 Polish zloty, exactly 112,900 for the 1.5 turbo version. The more powerful 1.6 turbo costs 129,900. The price includes a 7-year warranty or 150,000 kilometer mileage. Compared to the competition, it looks at least interesting. Hyundai Tucson, Kia Sportage with similar power or equipment configuration cost around 160,000 to 170,000 Polish zloty. I'm not even mentioning the price of its direct competitor, the Lamborghini Urus, obviously. The price is tempting, although to be fair, you have to point out, as with any Chinese car, that the brand is new and the used market doesn't know it yet. Besides, in this case, the bold design might look appealing today, but tomorrow it could get boring. As always, it's a trade-off. But if we consider the price-to-wow effect ratio, at least for today's looks and performance, then these drawbacks might seem insignificant. To sum up, this is one of those cars that you might want to buy not just because it's simply cheaper than the competition, but just for this, admit it, interesting look which might even make your neighbor with the Passat finally come over, kick the tire and ask if you'll let him take a spin in this Chinese Urus. Thank you very much for watching this episode. Remember to subscribe and see you in the next videos.